Welcome, this is Marc Steiner. Welcome to the Marc Steiner Show right here on the Real News Network. The Johns Hopkins Urban Health Institute is holding their annual symposium on the social determinants of health. This year it's happening on April the 30th. The theme this year is 1968 to 2018, Voices of Social Change, Empowered Communities for Health and Social Justice. And I'll be moderating a panel there on the Poor People's Campaign, but I'm here now with Eddie Conway and Durre Smith, who'll be speaking at the symposium as well. And welcome, good to have you both here.
Thanks for having me.
And as way of introduction, Eddie Conway, of course, a former Black Panther, who spent 44 years in the Maryland State prisons because of America's war on activists, and black activists in particular, in the 1960s. He is now executive producer here at the Real News Network, as well as being an author of several books. And we're also here with Durre Smith. Durre Smith is a Baltimorean, a Navy veteran, an activist, vice president of the Tubman House, a community activist group here in the city of Baltimore, and one of our leading activists who loves his community and wants to see it change for the better. So good to have you both here on the Marc Steiner Show. So the theme of this conference, and the theme of your panel in particular, is 1968 and 2018. And let me jump with you, Eddie, first. Thinking about where we were in 1968, where we are in 2018. There's been a lot of talk about these 50 years and what they have and have not changed in society, and how it's changed the very nature of the struggle in America. I mean, how would you bring that analysis forward?
Well, I have to step back for 1 minute and just say this. You know, I was very active in 1968, and in fact, the conditions were so bad that I felt it was important to join the Black Panther Party, which was a risky proposition in itself, right?
You out of the service then?
I was out of the service. I came home from the service to try to see what I could do to help deal with the conditions, right? But I must say now, in 2018, when I got out of jail in 2014, I was shocked. Shocked in the sense of how bad things had deteriorated. If it was bad then when I joined the Panthers, it's 10 times worse now. The city looks like it's been in a war in those 50 years. And it looks like a war zone. And so young people today, and as well as old, because it's still part of the city, have a tremendous job to do just to even bring it back to 68.
So how do you think that changes things, Durre? I mean, you grew up in the city, went off to the Navy, came back. So Eddie comes out of prison and sees neighborhoods that were once full of people, and people in all those houses, and community built around it, no matter what people were poor and struggling economically around racism and more, but come out and see the devastation that so many young people live with them. So how do you think that changes the nature of the struggle and what you have to do today?
I'm not sure if it necessarily does. Like you were saying, I was just away from home for maybe 4 years, and so while I wasn't here for the uprising, but I watched it on CNN.
You were in the Navy then?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I watched it on CNN, around all my fellow, I guess, shipmates. And, I guess what was interesting to me is to hear, their thoughts on things, and I'm just sort of sitting back. And oddly enough, I read Eddie's book, and I was like, I got to get out of the Navy. I'm not helping anybody by being here. So, I sort of had that same idea. It's like, I need to go home and do something. But I'm not sure if much has changed other than the tools we have, I guess, as activists now. But as far as the conditions, I mean, we still have the same struggle, so I'm not really sure if I can say that much has changed in that way.
So I'm curious, I'm going to take a short step backwards here, because you were just talking about your experience in the Navy. You talked earlier with me in other places about your experience in the United States Army when you were there in the late 60s. So I'm curious about two things. I mean, when you talk about you watched the Freddie Gray rebellion happen here in Baltimore on TV on the ship, what was the reaction of the people you were with?
I watched it on CNN, and I just sat around, and, as far as the military thing, you got to, hold it down and not necessarily be too out there and too radical. And, people are like, look at these idiots tearing up their home. Like, these have to be the dumbest people I've ever seen. They're you know, destroying a terrible place that they already lived in. Like, what do they not want better for themselves? I'm just like, you don't get it. You don't get it. So, yeah, I sort of felt like these are not my people. I need to go be with my people.
That sound familiar or different?
Yeah, it's exactly the same with me. I didn't try to hold it down. In fact, I think I probably lost it because when I looked at the Stars and Stripes, which was the Army paper that was over in Europe, and I seen on the front, I seen that tank in the black community with a 50 caliber machine gun pointed at those black women. I lost it. I said, what the devil am I doing? I'm getting ready to go to Vietnam, and I'm a sergeant in the Army at the time, and I'm ready to sign up for 3 more years. And I said, no, something's wrong. I'm getting out of here. And I actually went out on the parade field looking for my friends with the paper and asked them, did y'all see this? You know, and so I was just, that was the last straw for me. And I had decided then that, okay, no more Army, no more military, because I'm not gonna go somewhere and kill somebody to make the world safe for democracy when the world wasn't safe for democracy right here in our own country, right? But there was the general consensus in the Army, because the Army is a white institutional racist operation, that black people were rebelling for no reason whatsoever, and they got the best conditions and the best life that they could ever expect, you know, and what's wrong with them, you know? They wouldn't say that around me or black soldiers because we were probably fed up anyway at that time. This was during Vietnam. We were losing a lot of our brothers.
Right.
And we were starting to figure out that we were being used as cannon fodder, you know? So there was a lot of anger there anyway.
So let's take it to where we are now in 2018, and reflect a bit again on 1968. So one of the things I know that happened in '68, besides the demonstration and the fighting in the streets that did happen, especially in the student sector, was a lot of organizing was going on. Institutions, counter-institutions were being built, whether it was free medical clinics, breakfast programs, food co-ops and grocery stores, and other counter-institutions were being built to serve the people and to build a movement. So how does that play in today? I mean, because part of it was, you know, people think the '60s is in the streets, demonstrations, police attacking, all that was real and was a big part of what happened. But it also was about the organizing that took place, right, in the community itself. So talk about how you see that taking place in our communities now in terms of organizing and how that's going, and how that reflects on back, Eddie, for you in terms of how it was in '68 and what you see in 2018. But how do you talk about what the organizing looks like today in 2018?
Well, a lot of it is online.
Online, you said?
Yeah, a lot of it is online, I guess. But as far as organizing, I think you know, I can't say that there's like tanks in the street, but it's more of a like systemic thing, and it seems like people are focusing more on like systems and not necessarily, you know, may not necessarily be you know, I'm not gonna say there are no cops that are out, you know, so let me not even say that, but it seems like the focus has shifted a little from that to more like, wait a minute, let's look at the actual systems. So it seems like people are fighting more against the systems than like physical enemies, I guess. But like I said, there's a lot of online. It seems like everybody's an activist
like
online.
we were working the projects around Tubman House,
Correct.
right? Tubman House is here in Baltimore. It was a house that was seized by community members and turned into a meeting place and a place of safety. Gardens were built. It was right on the corner where Freddie Gray was arrested. So, I mean, what form does that take as you do your work? Is it like not going door to door, organizing around specific issues, rent or whatever that is? I mean, housing conditions. What form does it take for you?
Well, a lot of it is working with young people, you know, just teaching young people about the history and culture of movements and things like that, and growing food. Another very important piece of it, growing food, happens at the Tubman House. You know, and that sort of puts in people's minds that, you know, we have power, and, you know, food is, it's energy, it's power. You need it to live. So just growing food is a big piece of showing people that, you know, we have all the tools we need to sustain ourselves.
I want to come back to this growing food thing, because I think this is it's a highly overlooked part of organizing all over this country, and come back to that in a second, because I think it's really important. But how does that reflect on what you remember? Not that you're out of it now, because you're in Tubman House as well and organizing down there too.
Yeah, and the tanks are there, the helicopters are there, the weapons are there. They're only brought out when necessary, but that's been the case all the time. They've always been there, and they're still there in the background now. I guess the challenge to young people is to build things, institutions. What I find is that a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement is about reaction, protests. It's similar to the civil rights era demonstrations, pleading for moral persuasion to change something. Don't shoot, hands up. You know, I'm human. These kind of things, and I'll make you uncomfortable, but I'm not gonna really force any kind of real change. I think you don't get change until you push back further, and you can't have somebody see you as human. Excuse me, you have to see yourself as human and demand that other people treat you like that, and you can't ask them to do that. And I think that's part of what the difference is now. Back in the civil rights era, that's what was going on, but that didn't get any satisfaction. That's why stronger demands were made, and people had to push back, and people had to defend themselves. And I think today, stronger demands probably will have to be made, and people will have to protect their food sources and protect the things that they build at some point, because the people you're pleading to have morality has no morality.
So this is a really interesting point you just raised here. I'm just curious, really, Durre, how you reflect on this, and then really kind of get into this for a moment, is that we don't know what form today's movement, young people are going to take. I mean, in the early 60s, we didn't know what form it was going to take either, when we were beginning just to want to end segregation, not just wanting to, but ending segregation and being in the civil rights movement, then the anti-war movement, then organizing. And it kind of, after the assassinations of '68, especially King and Kennedy's assassination, the movement seemed to change and everything shifted. The government came down really hard and started coming after the Panthers and other groups in this country, putting people in jail, as Eddie knows all too well. And so that began to happen. So we don't know what twists and turns will necessarily happen. So I'm curious where you think the movement today is going. I mean, what's your vision, individually, collectively, about what you want to see, what world you want to see built?
That's such a tough question to answer, but...
It is a tough one. I'm sorry, I know it's not easy, but just...
But I don't know, I suppose, like, you know, Eddie was saying, you see that some things didn't work. You know, some things clearly don't work. You have to know you gotta know who you're up against. So I think that, you know, us young folks, we could really take a step back and learn about the history of movements and activism. If we could spend more time doing that, that would be great, you know? But I guess what I would like to see is, it's hard to say because there's so many different parts of activism and so many different ways to organize. And I like to say that we need them all, but I mean, we could have less rallies and have more people growing food, or, you know, doing direct action as opposed to, you know, asking and getting people to sign papers. It's all necessary, but maybe we could shift some of those energies. That would be great to see.
Yeah, I mean, because I think we are seeing demonstrations around the country. They need to happen, given what's happening. And every week there seems to be a new story about someone else who has been abused by the police. in the city, but all over not just in the city, but all over the country, right? And that's all too real. The waffle shops, and it's just horrendously horrible things that are happening. So we have to respond to that. But to really make that change, to make it like what we're pushing and fighting for. I mean, so how do you see the difference? You see the similarities in what people were saying in '68 and what they're saying in 2018, and what we're facing and what the strategies should be?
Well, and Durre made a good point about the things that didn't work. The government did come down hard on movements. And one of the reasons the government came down hard on movements was because the movement itself was building institutions, were building alternative relationships in the community, building ways in which the people in the community could empower themselves. That's always a frightening proposition. It's going to be a frightening proposition in the future, but people will have to build alternatives to the conditions they find themselves in. They're going to have to figure out how to feed themselves. They're going to have to figure out how to get health care. They're going to have to figure out how to control what's being taught in their schools. People have to do that. And the government's going to probably come down hard on them again. But you don't really have an alternative. And the alternative that the government presented to us was unemployment, mass incarceration, and drug the entire population. That's certainly not a future that we want our children to go into, especially with the planet being in peril right now.
So I'm wondering what role you think electoral politics plays in all this. And I asked that question for a specific reason. That was a debate back in the late '60s. Do we get involved in electoral politics? Do we stay in the street? And then you've seen this last election in Baltimore City, where we're broadcasting from, where a lot of young progressive council people were elected, black and white, men and women. And then you saw the recent vote in Annapolis, where the majority of both white liberal Democrats and the majority, a good number of the black caucus members, voted for this crime bill, which is similar to a crime bill that the 1994 omnibus bill under Clinton, that will lead to more people going to jail rather than getting to the root of why this is happening, to help people build a new society and a new community. So what role does that play for you right now in electoral politics? How important is that? Is that part, do you think, part of the strategy? Is there a split around that? Well, how do you see that playing out?
I mean, it's clearly a part of the strategy. It's a part of, the overarching system that we all fall under, but it's not my place. It's not where I plan to focus my energies. We got people on that. But that's a tough one. That's a really tough one, because a lot of people are putting their faith and hope and everything into these politicians. Like, they're just people. They're just people. And so I guess I spend less energy really focusing on those people.
Eddie?
Yeah, I do believe you should engage in the local politics. We should try to gain control of our communities, the municipalities, et cetera. I think that's an important piece, but I think we always have to recognize that the people that control the politics in America are the people that control the wealth in America. And even though we can put the numbers out there on the ground at some point, we still have to recognize who the power comes from, the wealth. And the wealth controls the means of production and so on. So we have to recognize that. And until we build alternative sources of power, the politics is always going to be up for sale.
So just one last thing. So these are not easy questions I'm throwing out, I know, but I mean, things that I ponder and think about a lot. So how do you both think then a movement gets built that is actually a movement that has some substance and broad reach, that reaches a lot of people to make that change? Because, I mean, that, there can be a few people who spearhead it, but unless there's a mass of people behind that spear, then it doesn't go anywhere. It can get crushed. So how do you see this playing out?
I guess it's like a snowball sort of thing. I'm upset about a thing, I write about it on Facebook, and a couple more people are upset about it too. But yeah, it seems like it's happening around, like an event will happen, or some tragic thing will happen. But that's what people are doing, reacting to these things. But as far as building a stronger movement, it's tough. It's very tough because things sort of seem to just die out. Like people have short attention spans. So I think that when you find that solid group of people, you know, you rock with them, whether it's 2 or 20, you'll get there.
I think you build a movement by building institutions. You build things like Tubman House. You build things like the water protectors. You build people that's opposed to the incinerator. You build movements by engaging in either stopping stuff or building stuff. And I think those groups will eventually connect and network together. You know, a similar thing happened in France in 1799 or something like
Right.
that. It was like 10,000 little groups. There was no mass movement. People wanted bread. People were hungry. People were being abused. People had all kinds of things that they were agitated about, but they organized in their little circles, but eventually those little circles networked. Something lit it, and it sparked. And all of those different groups came together, whether they was concerned about gender rights or whether they were concerned about slavery or whatever it was that they was concerned about at that time. They came together with that spark.
And on that note, thank you, Eddie Conway and Durre Smith. Good to have you both with us here on the Marc Steiner Show on the Real News Network. And folks, this Monday will be the conference taking place at Johns Hopkins on social change, empower communities for health and social justice, 1968 to 2018, that we will all be part of. And Eddie and Durre are also, let me just say, both part of Tubman House here in Baltimore. And I'm Marc Steiner for the Real News Network and the Marc Steiner Show. Thank you for being with us. See you next week.